Well, hello and welcome to Sunset TV. You're watching Viewpoint with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. India's mobile phone exports have soared to an unprecedented high, crossing the 2 lakh crore mark in the financial year 2024-25. This marks a significant 55% surge from the previous fiscal. Smartphones have emerged as India's largest export commodity, overtaking traditional leaders such as petroleum products and diamonds. The exponential growth in exports is largely attributed to the production-linked incentive scheme, which has played a transformative role in scaling up India's electronics manufacturing ecosystem. In this edition of Viewpoint, we will analyze India's mobile exports transformation. Joining me on the program today is S. Krishnan, Secretary, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology.
Thank you.
Mr. Krishnan, welcome and thank you for joining me on Viewpoint.
Thank you for having me on the program.
You know, mobile exports have gone up exponentially. They've crossed the 2 lakh crore mark in the present fiscal. How would you look back at this? What would you say has contributed to this rise?
I think it's instructive to look back on what has been happening on mobile production in the country. About 10 years ago, we were importing almost 75% of the mobiles that were sold in the country. Today, not only have we come to a situation where about 99.4% of the mobiles which are sold in the country are assembled here, we are actually exporting mobiles. You have a situation where in 2020-21, the total mobile exports from India was about 22,698 crores. This doubled in 21-22 to 45,000. It went up further to 90,000 by 22-23, 1,29,000 by 23-24, and as you just mentioned, it has exceeded 2 lakh crores by 24-25 fiscal year, and it's expected to go up even further. A number of reasons for it. The primary reason for it is the launch of the production-linked incentive scheme for large-scale electronic manufacture, which basically focused on scale of manufacture. As you're aware, today, roughly about 45% of all electronics manufacture in India and electronics consumption is actually mobile phones. It's the most used electronics product, not just in India, but globally. And therefore, its share has grown and everyone now uses these instruments. And we have a situation where there are a limited number of brands which are sold globally. There is Apple, of course, and there is Samsung, and there are 3 or 4 major Chinese brands. So there are only about 5 brands which are sold globally, and almost all 5 of those brands have production bases here in India. And the most notable of those, of course, is Apple. In terms of value, they are more expensive and high-end phones, and they are being made for the global market from India. And of the total Apple ecosystem, slowly, a significantly larger and larger proportion is moving to India. Most of this happened in the early 2020s. In the context of the China Plus One opportunity of shifting some of the production into India. And the PLI scheme came in very handy for the shift in operations. And it's not just about exports and it's not just about the number of phones, but it's fundamentally about jobs. Because the number of jobs which are generated in this industry are huge and tremendous. The largest factories in the country today are mobile phone factories. Whether you look at Noida in neighboring Uttar Pradesh or whether you look at Sriperumbudur in Tamil Nadu, you have a large number of workers who are employed in these mobile phone manufacturing facilities. Each facility employs up to 40,000-50,000 people or more. And there are very few factories in this country which employ so many people. So that is a remarkable story in terms of the number of jobs which get generated in this segment. And as far as India is concerned, totally, if you look at our total mobile phone market, it's a little over about 900 odd million phones are sold in the country. People normally keep mobile phones for about 2 to 3 years. And so annually, the Indian market for mobile phones has virtually sort of peaked and plateaued at about 30 to 33 crore mobile phones per year. That is about 300 to 330 million mobile phones a year. So when the domestic market, you've reached virtual saturation, you have to look at exports as the possible option. And government scheme in terms of both PLI, which has supported overall increase in domestic manufacture for the domestic market, is now expanding into exports, and that is the primary reason. The second reason, of course, is that increasingly we are trying to deepen the value chain in India, and we are attempting to see that more of the components are also manufactured in India, so that a significantly larger proportion of the value chain is part of this country.
Absolutely. Okay, components and value chains. Let's start there. Quite a few things that we can take forward. One being Apple, one being domestic saturation as well, and what could be the new avenues that we can look at. But let's first look at components, and let's look at the value chain, so to speak. What's being done on that front? Because one criticism over the years has been that yes, the mobile exports have gone up exponentially, but we've seen most of the parts being assembled here and then going abroad, but the actual manufacturing bit of it is something that is missing, is what one of the major criticisms is. How are we addressing that? How do we take that forward?
See, I think the most important thing is that in order for a component ecosystem to take root, it is essential to have scale of manufacture. You should have enough mobile phones being assembled in the country for the component players to come in. Sequentially, if you looked at the way this industry is developed in different parts of the world, it first starts with assembly, and I don't think we should scoff at assembly itself simply because that's where the largest number of jobs are.
Absolutely.
So there is an importance to assembly. But as you assemble more and more phones in the country, then you have to start sourcing the components. And we also need to realize that electronics in general and mobile phones in particular they are a part of a global value chain. Not all parts are produced in any one country. Not even China produces everything internally. Even in China, the total value addition which takes place is about 40%. The rest of it is imported and put together there, and then it gets exported. In India, the value addition was between 18 to 20%. As a matter of strategy, we were very keen to push for higher value addition, because that's when the industry gets rooted in India, and you become more self-reliant, or you become part of a very sustainable and reliable supply chain. And that is why it is important to bring in electronic component manufacture. In the bill of materials, non-semiconductor components constitute about 40 to 50% of the value of the mobile phone. And that is what we are targeting in the first place. And that is what it is for that purpose that we launched the electronic component manufacturing scheme recently. It was approved by the cabinet in the month of March, and it's being implemented with a total outlay of 22,919 crore, where the basic idea is to manufacture specific kinds of assemblies, sub-assemblies and components within the country, and to feed the manufacturing supply chain of electronics. The other advantage with electronic components is they cut across a range of electronics goods which are used in, of course, mobile phones, but in addition in IT hardware like laptops, servers, desktop computers, in medical electronics, in automotive electronics. Across the board, electronics are increasingly being used, and the component manufacturing scheme actually serves the entire value chain, serves the different subsectors within electronics.
Absolutely. All right. We were speaking about Apple and how that has played a big role really in as far as India's mobile exports are concerned. Now, Apple has also said that almost all phones in the United States are going to be sourced out of India. Now, that definitely is a positive sign. So, is this also going to have a further impact, positive impact on mobile exports from India?
Of course, it certainly will. Currently, they exported last year about 24 billion worth of mobile phones from India, but the overall US market is about twice that size. So what will have to happen is that we will have to probably cater to the entire US market from India. And if we have to do that, the US market and the Indian market, these two, because the Indian market for Apple mobiles is also growing.
Is right? Yes, it is.
So to cater to these two markets, a fairly substantial step up in the level of production that we see today is required. They have newer factories which are coming up. One at near Tumkur in Karnataka and another near Krishnagiri in Tamil Nadu. Both of these factories are coming up and will be up and producing in addition to their existing facilities. And the other major push that they are giving is to source more of the components within India as well, simply because they've reached scale, and for them it makes sense to source more of the components from India. And the electronic component manufacturing scheme will also push and assist that effort as we go along. So we have to see more than a doubling of the total exports that we see today in order to meet that goal of serving the entire US market.
Absolutely. So there's a lot that needs to be done as well, and I'm sure that baby steps are being taken, or maybe even giant leaps are being taken. You'll be able to tell us more about that.
Yes, we are gearing up to make sure that we are able to support this ecosystem in India. A lot of the action, of course, is done by private sector firms, and as is natural, ease of doing business is very important, ensuring that they have all their clearances, ensuring that they have their logistics in place, ensuring that they have their infrastructure in place, ensuring that they are able to access skilled human resources and people are given adequate training and skilling. All these are important measures that the governments can do. It involves both the government of India and also the state governments who have to get involved in this. It is not just MeitY as a ministry, but we have involvement with, say, the Ministry of Civil Aviation, because most of this has to be cleared through the various airports in the country, and therefore the logistics requirements have to be met there. Our roads will need to be used. You'll have to upgrade road infrastructure wherever it is needed. You have to ensure that, as I said, human resources are adequately available. So the skilling missions, both at the Government of India level and in the state governments, need to meet this requirement. The industries departments in various ministries need to support this. We have to ensure that all the labor clearances are given in time. Then, of course, there is also the clearance through customs, because what happens is, as I said, it's a global value chain, and we are attempting to increase our share of the global value chain in electronics from about 18 to 20% value added. We are trying to double it through the electronic component manufacturing scheme, take it up to about 35 to 40%. In order to enable that to happen, which means that a lot of quick clearances have to be given from the customs side of inputs coming in, and then when the final product goes out, it needs to be cleared and sent out quickly. In addition, a lot of the equipment which is required to manufacture has to be put together here, so we have to build up the vendor supply chains. So a lot of support. Everyone needs to act together in concert to enable this to happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm sure the pieces of the puzzle are all coming together. Talking about opportunities, Mr. Krishnan, tariff war or the trade war between the United States and China seems to be the flavor of the season. Everyone's talking about it. It has a cascading effect on everything else around us too. Is this an opportunity for India?
Of course, it's an opportunity for India. We had one opportunity of China plus one immediately after the COVID pandemic. At that point, there was some shift towards India, but geopolitical and other factors prevented the shift to be more pronounced. It could have been more, but because of geopolitical factors, it wasn't as much as it could have been. And naturally, our national security concerns are uppermost. But now we have a second opportunity, and I think now the diversification of the supply chains is also more. So we can possibly achieve more of a shift into India without having to necessarily rely only on China. We can do it independent of that. And because of that reason, I think there is a second opportunity that we have, literally a second bite at the cherry. And I think this time around we are better prepared and we can be more successful.
Are there any schemes, in particular that we need to focus on, that we need, maybe the private sector needs a little bit of hand-holding to take them through all of this as well? So anything in particular that we are working on?
The electronic component manufacturing scheme is probably the most important element of this, because that is what is going to shift the value chain literally and bring more of the component manufacture into the country. So that is clearly one. The second part of it is could also be that the existing PLI scheme itself will have to be fully utilized, and we'll have to make sure that that is properly harnessed to support what needs to happen on this. The third part is all the efforts that the government has been taking on improving the ease of doing business. That's been a big focus of the government, and that cuts across various segments, various ministries, and efforts being made in various directions. There is an effort at greater deregulation, which is being led directly by the Cabinet Secretariat. All of these will contribute to this shift taking place and ensuring that we are able to ramp up production with the desired speed.
You know, since we are here and we're talking about the PLI scheme, we are also talking about PLI 2.0. You know, the budget spoke about it, and the economic survey also spoke about it. We're trying to expand the PLI scheme, bring in other components into it as well. What kind of an impact do you see that having?
You see, the PLI scheme, of course, the most successful of the PLI schemes, 14 PLI schemes which are launched, is the large-scale electronics manufacture. And that is the big one which has really worked well. Maximum disbursement has taken place under the scheme. Till the end of March 2025, we have disbursed almost 11,368 crore under the scheme. So by far, it's been the most successful. We also launched from MeitY the PLI 2.0 for electronic hardware manufacture, which means manufacturing of laptops, manufacturing of computers, servers, and desktops. That scheme is expected to take off in the current year, as many large companies which are engaged in that sector will start participating in that area, and we see substantial traction for the electronics manufacturing, hardware manufacturing scheme in the current year. And that scheme also has an advantage in the sense that it requires more and more domestic manufacture or localization of the inputs and localization of the components. So going hand in hand with the electronic component manufacturing scheme, I think we should be able to see significant uptick there as well in terms of more and more servers which are used for both data centers and used for various other operations. More and more of the laptops that we use in this country, more and more of those will be manufactured within the country.
Absolutely. All right. Let's move forward now. We'll widen the scope of the discussion. We'll try to look at the electronics ecosystem as a whole. Now, how would you look at the electronics ecosystem, electronics manufacturing ecosystem as a whole? And, you know, we'll talk about AI as well just after this.
See, in the electronic manufacturing ecosystem, there are a few distinct parts. Where India has an advantage clearly is on the labor front, and as I said, the assembly part of it is which is most labor intensive. So that's where the jobs are, and therefore we should not ignore it. That's an area we should be very concerned with, because ultimately all development is about prosperity and about better quality jobs. So that becomes a significant element. Next is components, and components is basically conventional manufacturing abilities, and we need to focus on those elements, and that is what the electronic component manufacturing scheme does well. We are focused. We are not trying to do everything in that value chain. We are focused on certain components and assemblies where either the value addition or the total value is high, or where we already have a presence and we can scale up. So these are the two types of components that we are focusing on, so that existing industry also gets a lift in the country, and we focus on manufacturing newer components which have hitherto not been manufactured here but will have a significant value and therefore are worth focusing on. So these are the two things we are doing under the ECMS. In addition, there is the semiconductor portion, which is another big chunk. And as you are aware, the India Semiconductor Mission has been a very successful launch as well. During the current calendar year, in the second half of the calendar year, we should actually see the first semiconductor chips rolling off commercial facilities in India in our history. And I think that's a very significant moment. That is psychologically a very significant moment, that we have a commercial scale semiconductor production facility operational in the country at a scale where it is commercially viable and it will go across the world. So I think that's an important element. Then more facilities will come on stream in the next 1 or 2 years, and in parallel we are working on the next steps in how do we sort of actually expand semiconductor manufacturing in the country, look at how we can do more semiconductor design in the country, because we have an inherent strength of having more than 20% of the total semiconductor design workforce working out of India. We need to take advantage of that. We need to sort of ride on the human resources that we possess to go towards semiconductor design, and really look at how India can again become a product nation as well, saying how both in the software space and in the device or hardware space, we once again become a country from where brands are built and products are built.
Absolutely. Yeah, Mr. Krishnan, let's also talk about the areas of concern and challenges along the way, and how do we address them?
Well, there are of course areas of concern. First and foremost is the availability of skilled human resources in all of these areas. If you take semiconductor manufacture, I said in semiconductor design we have 20% of the workforce, but semiconductor manufacture has hardly ever taken place in this country, and it's high precision manufacturing, and we don't have people with those kind of skills. So we have to work very hard in making sure that we have enough people who are skilled to run all these foundries and ATMPs as they come up. So clearly skilling is one key area that we need to address. The second key area is costs. There are, when there are other countries which have much higher scale and much greater specialization, they bring much lower costs. So we have to find a way that we are really competitive, and we can't do it behind very high tariff barriers. We have to, if we have to be making the right investments, and if we have to be investing in the right businesses, we have to ensure that they are competitive. We have to ensure that this is a sector where we can actually export. That is what proves our competitiveness, and we can't do it behind high tariff barriers. We have to do it maybe with some initial protection for 1 or 2 years, and within that period try to become competitive. So this is a real challenge, and if we have to be competitive and costs have to come down, costs come down through larger scale, and therefore scale is something we are focusing on. Costs also come down through reduced transaction and friction costs, because we are implementing these industries for the first time, so we have to make sure that our logistics are first rate. Globally they are first rate. We have to move things around quickly. We can't afford delays in clearances. All of this has to be seamless so that we are a first rate competitive manufacturing nation.
Absolutely.
We proved it in certain sectors, we have to prove it again.
Absolutely. Now, something related now, and since we are here, let's talk about the large learning model as well, the LLM, so to speak. We've been trying to get our own LLM out there because, that's the thing of the future. How far along the way are we, and what's happening on that front?
As you're aware, we, under the India AI mission, under the India Artificial Intelligence mission, there is a provision to build large foundational models for India. That was one of the verticals. Again, the India AI mission has a number of other verticals, and we threw them open earlier. There was some debate internally in the country on whether we should focus on building a large foundational model domestically, or whether we just work on models which have already been built elsewhere in the world and benefit from those by building applications, because the benefits of AI really come through applications eventually.
Absolutely.
So there was this internal debate and amongst experts and others as to what will be the best approach to take. Eventually it was felt that given that you need models which are true to India's own culture, and you need models which will work in the Indian circumstance, taking advantage of all the data that we have in the country, a foundational model has to be built which is India specific as well. Secondly, in addition to a large language model which can be used across a variety of things, you also need to build small language models or smaller models which are specific to sectors and specific to use cases. And in India's case, the benefit of AI really comes when they are used in productive sectors of the economy, like manufacturing, like agriculture, like healthcare, like education. So you need specific models for each of these sectors, and that is another area we need to work on, which is why then we put out an appeal for, put out a call for proposals for support from various consortia, academic institutions, even startups and private companies as to who wants to build the large foundational model for India. We've had outstanding response. There have been three deadlines so far: 15th of February, 15th of March, and 15th of April. We've received more than 400 applications so far. From the first round of applications which we received on the 15th of April, there were 67 applications which we received. We've shortlisted the first of the models, and you would recall that about 10 days ago, the Minister for Electronics and Information Technology had announced the first consortia that we had selected for this purpose, and they would be building India's first large language model, and that should, and it's based primarily on India's data requirements, on Indian language data, and so on, and India's needs specifically. The founders have promised us that they should have the first model ready in about 6 months' time.
Let's hope that that happens, and I'm sure that that will bring about a lot of cheer as well. Before I let you go, Mr. Krishnan, one final thought on, we've seen mobile exports exponentially rise, and we've seen that it is clearly a success story. Is there a lesson for us in that for something else?
I would say the lesson really is that, this is a digital world, and we find that the digital economy is growing twice as fast as the rest of the economy. The Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology had a study done with ICRIER recently, which showed that about 10 years ago, the digital economy was about 6 to 7%. Today, it is about 12 to 13%. It's almost doubled. It's likely to go up to 20% by about 2030. Right? So the share of the digital economy in the overall economy is increasing. It is growing twice as fast. And mobiles are one of the manifestations of the digital economy. So we have to ride this wave. We have to ensure that India takes advantage of this, and our goal of becoming a Viksit Bharat, or becoming a developed country by 2047, can be achieved only if we ride the technology wave, both in terms of electronics, in terms of artificial intelligence as a new cross-cutting technology, and riding it on the basis of semiconductors, and possibly newer developments like quantum computing and so on. So each of these areas, we have to be at the cutting edge of what needs to happen in the technology space.
To ride the technology way to ensure that we achieve Viksit Bharat, by 2047 and become a developed nation is what Mr. Krishnan is suggesting. Mr. Krishnan, thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And putting things into perspective for us. Much appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, that's it in this edition of Viewpoint. This is Frank Rausen Pereira signing off.